Today, I have the pleasure of talking with Alexa, a recent studio art graduate from Williams College. This discussion is part of a series of talks between Williams College Museum of Art interns and the class of 2021 studio art majors. I'm Annie, an engagement intern and a rising junior. And as of now, I'm studying studio art and math. And today I'm alongside a fellow WCMA intern, Amber.
Hello, my name is Amber. I am the academic engagement graduate intern at WCMA. I'm studying art history in the Williams College grad art program. Thank you for joining us today, Alexa. We're really excited to be able to chat with you. I was just wondering if you could take a moment to introduce yourself briefly.
Of course. Well, hi, I'm Alexa. I also go by my nickname Slug. All my works are signed Slug, so I was like, wait, I should probably mention that. I usually have a necklace that says Slug, but I took it off for interviews. I use they them pronouns. I'm from Southern California originally, and I just graduated from Williams, and I studied studio art, women's gender and sexuality studies, and I concentrated in Africana studies. And I also was a WCMA intern in 2019 for the summer. I was an engagement intern. It was like the best experience of my life. So So glad to talk to you guys.
Yes, lovely. Thank you. So I was hoping to start with your video game titled As Far Back as I Can Remember. And I wanted to start with this because I feel like it sets this wonderful tone for the rest of your work. So first, can you just talk a bit for people who may have not seen it, just a bit about it, a description or sketch, whatever you'd like.
So As Far Back as I Can Remember is based on this sort of notion that I was wondering for a while about when it comes to my childhood. Do I owe people the truth, or do I owe people, or owe myself the truth? Do I owe myself the truth, or do I owe myself how I remember it? Because I think a lot of childhood memories are stuck between this sort of bridge between, was this something that should have been happening to me as a child, but also did I remember this as a specifically traumatizing memory? And so as a child, I lived on like right when I was like in preschool, all the way up until I think around like fourth grade, lived in an apartment building on the cross street of Sepulveda and Van Owen in Los Angeles. And this is a part of a city called Van Nuys, and I just spent a lot of time there as a kid. And so this game is a kind of mapping of some of the places I remember the most fondly and the most, like, the strongest memories of. And so I wanted to give sort of a blank, generalized, I really loved video games as a child, and that was a part of my childhood, was a lot of video games. And so I wanted to use that platform to also be a site of like memory and, you know, mapping those memories and giving them some sort of like space in the digital world, sort of to like answer that question of like owing myself my own memories or owing myself my own truth. So I used a platform called GDevelop 5, which is actually, I don't really know how to code, and I don't really study computer science, so I just had to watch a lot of YouTube tutorials on how to use it, which was really actually valuable, and I think an awesome skill to have, to just like try and learn, like, you know, I'm not one of those people who's like, everybody should learn to code, or everybody should learn how to do, you know, those kind of technological things, because it was really cool and really fun to get to sort of map and digitally walk through those spaces that I haven't seen in a while. So
yeah, very cool. And tell me about the soundtrack. I really liked, for me, I don't know like how much of this is objective versus like some subjective relation I had with it, but it's like this mix of like, it's like spa nostalgic.
Yeah, I mostly was like looking through music that didn't have like a lot of rights attached to it. Like I was like, something that I can use that I won't have to worry. Like, so it was like sort of like free creative license music. And this one just sort of struck me as like something that was unrecognizable. Like I wouldn't use like a song by like, I don't know, like Lady Gaga or something. Like it would just distract you from what was actually happening. And I wanted to sort of be like calming and feel like a memory and just be sort of like gentle, just sort of give this nostalgic, childlike, sort of dreamlike feeling to it.
Awesome. And then just to take a step back, because you're talking about the music selection, and I'm really attracted to this idea of memory and how you're integrating that into your pieces. but I'm just wondering if you can explain more about your artistic process with these specific pieces from the show. What steps did you take to make these works? I'm really curious if you started from text or sketches, and then did that turn into a digital medium, or did you start with the paintings that then prompted this digital format? Were they serving as like prototypes for your videos almost?
So it was kind of an interesting process. I did this as like an honors project. So I started back in January and didn't do a lot of actual creating, did a lot of more thinking. And I'm realizing like now how actually so important it was to think about it a lot before I even started making anything. And sort of my artistic process around these pieces, I think the digital aspect was not made first, but the digital aspect was my initial intention, was that I was initially going to do the whole thing sort of digitally, but I kind of came to this spot where I was like, I really love to paint and I want to paint things. And so it was a lot of like, just, I want to do something I enjoy at the end of college here, and sort of not just focus on the video game, because I was like a little worried about living up to a certain standard of video game. So I made it sort of in this style of like, you can't really play that, but you can watch it. So it's kind of in the style of like, I don't know if you guys seen like digital novels, where like, it's kind of a game, but you click through it and you sort of experience it that way. It's sort of like a press a button thing. So yeah, I was a little worried about living up to like a standard. So I was like, you know what? I also want to create these massive paintings to sort of like memorialize in a different style, in a more like, not necessarily realistic, but in a more clear sort of, it kind of looks like this is, one of them's like a landscape. The two figure ones kind of look like they're supposed to be like figures, and I kind of like accidentally did some like accidental religious imagery, and when I was like talking about it for like my defense, I was like, oh, did not realize I did that. So it was kind of an accident, but it worked out, a beautiful accident. But like when it came to the process, I think I started mostly by looking at the street that I was sort of talking about, Sepulveda and Denowen, which is where a lot of these places are sort of branching off from and very close to. They're all sort of within like 20 minutes of each other. I think not even 20 minutes. Most of them are walking distance between each other. Hence the sort of walking to the places, because they kind of go in order, starting at the apartment building, moving outward onto the street, and then kind of going back to the apartment building. Essentially, I started by going to Google Maps and just scrolling down the street and looking at all the places. And I just have a lot of memories. It's actually the location of the doctor's office. The hospital I was born at is there. And then also the doctor's office is on the street. And my like family members still go to that doctor. So I still sometimes visit that street, but it just feels very distant. And it feels very like sort of somber to be there. So like going and looking through the Google Maps, and then also I would call my parents and talk to them about memories and talk to them about, what I experienced as a child, and then also like what I feel about it now. And so there was a lot of sort of talking with my parents and talking through with my family about those places. And then also just like thinking back of memories of like what it felt to be there as a kid, and then what it felt to return there as an adult. And a lot of just things have happened where like I've come back and like stores have been gone, but like the one painting of the big clown ice cream is actually based on this ice cream cone clown from Baskin Robbins that they like just had corporate like product throughout like my whole life. And I looked it up and like researched a little bit about it and was like, I don't know if this is a fever dream, but I remember seeing it and always wanting that ice cream cone clown. Never got it. So I painted that to sort of represent that Baskin Robbins, which is sort of a part of it, because the Baskin Robbins was an important part of that street. You can see the Baskin Robbins out the window of the doctor's office that's on that street. So it just felt like there was a connection there. And then like with the duck, there's this one part where I'm like going in the game, there's this one part where I'm like going into a store and there's like a checks cashing sort of place. And I used to go there with my dad when he'd cash his disability checks or something like that. Way before there was direct deposit sort of thing going on. I don't even know, but we would go there and catch them in person. And because there would be a little extra money on hand, he would buy me some snacks. So I would always buy bubble yum gum. And that's the mascot for the bubble yum gum, is that duck. And then like at one point I'm at a lake and I used to go there and fish, and sort of like, it was inexpensive to buy fishing bait, and my family already had poles, like fishing poles. So we would go there to that park a lot because it was an inexpensive way to sort of feel like we were doing something as a family. We grew up very much so below the poverty line. So it was just, there was a lot of sort of figuring out how money could be spent in efficient ways. And I just have a lot of memories of just being told, not necessarily being told no, but just a lot of difficult memories. So like a lot of these memories are more happy memories that then I look back and I realize, well, the only reason we did this was for something sad, but also like, again, that sort of, do I owe myself how I remember it, of like not being, these being good memories, or do I look to the truth of understanding now as an adult, these were times we were struggling. So like the fish one is based on a lake, and that was based on this golden carp fish that I caught the first time I ever went fishing. And this one spot in the lake where we would always go to, it was like our spot, we'd always go there. And so that's kind of what's happening there. And so artistically, they do work together, but the game sort of aspect came, that I was going to do that first, but the paintings came after. But together, they're all sort of based on these same memories. So like artistically, I think they kind of exist in the same space, that like I intended them to work together, just in sort of different, almost like you have the game, and then you have the trading cards for the game, like Pokemon, like how you have the Pokemon, the show, the game, and the trading cards, and they exist in different mediums, but the universes are connected. You can kind of be like, oh, this is what this is referring to, and I see that happening there. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to talk more about, you mentioned how it sort of started with a lot of thinking about the memory, and the concept of like memory in general as being something so hard to grasp. In your artist statement, you said that your work, quote, recognizes its feelings that are difficult to put into words. And then you go on to list a few. A character once loved, the ability to remain unashamed in our silliness, and so on. So can you talk more about starting on a new work of art? Like what makes you reach for the sketchbook, or like what the initial spark is like? Because working with these really fluid, confusing, like always present, but in the background things, I'm wondering how they first start to get on, to get transformed into a physical work of art.
I think it took a lot, and this is just something that has always been a problem for me when it comes to art. I have trouble creating it on command. Like I have trouble just with projects, which this was like a project. And unless I'm like deeply invested in the subject and I have a lot of thoughts about it, I have just a lot of swirling, I just have a really, really bad ADHD. Did not really get diagnosed till like 2 years in college. So I look back and I think about this specific issue that I have when it comes to creating on command, and I'm like, that's probably a part of that. But yeah, I think what makes me reach for my sketchbook is a lot of emotion. I'm a Pisces, like hard cut Pisces. I'm not sure how I feel about everything else when it comes to astrology, but I'm like, regardless, I'm like, if I believe in anything, it's that I am a Pisces, and that's what I am. And when it comes to the description, it just makes so much sense. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't I believe that? Because that's way too close to how I actually am to be a coincidence. And so emotion is just a lot of what pushes me to grab a sketchbook. I used to say that I only made art when I was sad, or when I was like, and not just when I'm sad, but as a Pisces, I take a lot of joy in being sad sometimes because it makes for great art. And that sounds kind of morbid, but like, I think a lot of it is emotion, is that I feel an emotion, and in order to metabolize the emotion, I'm like, I should put this energy that I'm feeling into something. It's like at home, the walls of my room are covered in paintings, because growing up, I never had my own room. We always lived in like one bedroom apartments where like I was like in the living room. And so my parents were like, you can do whatever you want to this room once you have it. So like starting at age 14, horrible age to start this, because I was really into like Doctor Who and like Sherlock and all those things. So like that's everything on my wall. It's a mess. I was also like an emo kid, so there's a lot of My Chemical Romance and stuff. Just painted all of these things on my walls that I often painted when I was feeling a really intense emotion. To like, and they don't necessarily connect to those emotions, but it's just the process of creating, I think, brings me a lot of peace and allows me to like think through things and like find ways to turn those emotions into visuals. And so I think a lot of what makes me reach for the sketchbook is metabolizing both trauma and good feelings too. And like, I do a lot of creating for people. Like I'm like my current partner I'm seeing right now, I always like show up to his house with paintings and like just give them to him, like little paintings. And I'm like, I feel like that could be weird if you don't know me, that I just show up with a painting every time I see someone and I'm like, oh, I made this for you, or I got this for you. And I think gift giving and like giving to people and like making things for people is an important part. So like I think I'm motivated by both other people and also other people's creative practices. A lot of my work is like inherently collaborative, even if it's not like described as that. Just a lot of my friends are also artists, and I spend a lot of time just like shooting ideas at them, being like, what do you think if we just talk through each other's processes? So like I think I owe a lot of my creative process to emotion, and also just to like the concept of other people being honestly wonderful, but like being out there and not in a people pleaser kind of way, but like in a I want you to be a part of this kind of way, both in giving and talking through work.
Yeah, I really love that second part, because in my practice, I was always like, had this stuck up, stiff ideal of like isolated artist in the room creating their isolated, like the work of art. That is disconnected from everything. But since the isolation of coronavirus hit, I realized that I like people and that my art, my thinking, my walking through the world is just so much better when there is an exchange between people. So I really like that.
Totally agree.
Alexa, I'm really drawn to your use of medium, the paint, but also this digital format in relation to what you're talking about with memory, because I feel like it's really tied to time. Acrylic being a very fast drying medium, and then also having this digital format, which is kind of this, continuously looping almost video game. So I'm wondering if you can talk more about your choices for displaying these memories, because they seem to be really tied to a specific moment or a specific place. So what does that mean to take something that's like physical and put it into the digital, or something that is static or something that is always moving?
Well, I totally think you've hit that right on the mark when it comes to like, they are very tied to like a very specific moment in time and place. Like, and I think when it comes to acrylic, it's both a technical and a like just I love to paint, but I took an oil painting class, took it with Layla Ali, who kicked my ass. But that's the class that made me realize I wanted to major in studio art, because I was like, I'm suffering, but I'm having the best time. I was absolutely miserable, but like in the best way. I was like, this is the kind of misery I want to experience constantly, in like a total Pisces fashion. And so acrylic is really what I choose because I hate oil painting. And that's such a slow drying, and it gives you a lot of time to like think and like change. But I think with acrylic, I'm somebody who's so impulsive. Like the fish on the one painting was not painted till like the day I took it over, because I was like looking at it and I was like, it's missing something. And I sat there and just painted the fish in white really quick, because it was really funny, because I showed up and Amy Palmer was like, this is new. And I was like, yeah, put that in there. And it just forces you to be really, really articulate with what you want to do as soon as you put it down, because it's going to dry in 10 minutes. And I do really appreciate that as a medium, because I'm very indecisive, and I will keep layering on and keep putting on and keep putting on, trying to perfect it, instead of just accepting that I put the paint down and that it works that way. And I think that works with memory too. Just accept that it happened that way, and then work through building around it and work through processing it as a whole piece, not just as that one part of it. And I think that works for life as well, of like processing trauma and bad memories of childhood also as like a piece of you, of like, you will never kind of escape it because it's a part of you. And it's not necessarily that I want to escape my childhood sort of traumas and childhood experiences. Like, really, I think where a lot of the concepts of this whole project comes from is I was discussing with my family this one period of life we were homeless. And it's funny. And it's only funny because, and I think a lot of people, I tell it to them and they're like, they get really somber and sad. And I'm like, no, it's funny, because we were like living in a motel for like a little bit of period of a summer because we were evicted. And at the time I was so young, I was like, this was, I think, around 4th grade. So I think the other place actually lived until like 2nd or 3rd. So we moved around a lot of different apartment buildings. just because it's expensive to live in Los Angeles. Just got evicted a lot. We actually got evicted from that first apartment, which is why there's such a like detachment from it, of like it was kind of taken from me too young. But like I really thought we were on vacation. I knew we were homeless and I knew we didn't have a place to live, but I had so much fun being homeless. Like we just were at a hotel and there was a pool and we got to eat McDonald's a lot and we were in a kitchen. We just in a hotel room. And so as a kid, I experienced that as a good memory. And I look at it back now and it's really difficult for me to look at it because like I want to cry. I'm like, we were homeless. But I'm like, but do I owe myself the truth of like, do I owe my past self in my memories sort of that truth of like, it was a difficult, sad thing that no one should have to go through, of being without a home and being houseless, but like also thankful for the fact that like I look on it as an experience that was positive because of this whimsy and this childlike sort of understanding of the world, but also because of the people around me making sure that it wasn't a bad experience and like doing everything in their power. So like when it comes to that sort of looping aspect of the digital, I think this is something that goes through my head a lot. So I'm like sort of, I think I put a lot of memories on loop in my head and I put a lot of things on loop. So I think the looping is both an aspect of wanting it to sort of continue to play and like wanting people to experience it. That was just sort of a factor of the museum. But also when I think about it, I'm like, I do think I re-experience these traumas over again because I think a lot of this was processing through the fact that it's neither positive nor negative. It's neither good nor bad. It's neither truth nor fantasy. It's just the way it is. And I think that sort of works with those mediums of like, especially with acrylic, it's just the way it is. And once you put it down, it's sort of there, and sort of dealing with the sort of set in time and moving temporality of like a digital piece that's always moving and always sort of will exist out there, that can't sort of be, can be deleted, but it sort of always exists in data form out there. It's been playing over and over again. It's moving, it's living, versus like a piece that is stagnant and sort of just a figure frozen in time. Sort of working through being frozen in time and being constantly moving, because I think that's kind of how I see memory, of like, it is both frozen and always moving. And you're always going to carry it sort of with you. But like it's up to our individual choices sort of to decide how we carry it and how heavy it is. I think how heavy it is sometimes up to us and how we deal with it. But you know, everyone does with things differently, and this is just how I've dealt with it. And I think that does kind of work with the materials and with the sort of mediums of the pieces, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's remarkable hearing you talk about your work, because usually when I'm in discussion with someone talking about their work, it's like something that feels, their words feel alongside the work, like almost tangential. And hearing you talk about your work further, it is so like present in the work that it's amazing. And I hope that whoever, you know, is hearing you talk really takes a chance to look at your work, because I mean, my next question was, it was regarding like how it oozes with personality and life and whimsy, but there does seem to be a slight darkness within the colors and an edge to it as well. And, you know, I don't even have to ask that now because it's so clear. So it's really remarkable how much this is embodied through the visual, and that's, you know, that's so difficult.
Thank you. That's all an artist ever wants to hear.
Yeah, so amazing. I hope that, I mean, like many, I was only able to see it digital because of coronavirus. So hopefully someday I'll see it in person.
I hope to. I really do.
Yeah. But I'd like to move on to a different topic now, which is your second study in college of women's gender and sexuality studies. And I just wanted to know how these interacted with each other, or if there was a direct influence, or they provided a balance to each other, how you saw them and studied them both together.
I think a lot of, especially like more of the like Widgets and ethnic studies do a lot of value in art that I see. I'm gonna make a broad claim. I feel like I see it a lot more in those departments than I do in other departments. despite the fact that the object lab exists and I've seen like neuroscience use art, I feel like it's not done in a way that's like continuous. I think it's done in a like, okay, we'll use this resource and it'll be great. We'll put some art. Whereas like, I feel like I've read a lot of poetry and looked at a lot of art in classes. So I think it's been really valuable to see how other people who study both art and, you know, maybe like something that's more based in like their identity or like social studies to like in through art. So I think that's been really cool. But I also think that like studying about widgets and also like Africana studies has like allowed me to get perspective on my experience in the world. I like to say that I went to college to study myself, like queer Black people, like, and also like, you know, things on colorism and things on mixed race things, which has really been important too, because it's a totally different experience. It's very important to be aware of that too. And I think that being able to study all those different things has given me perspective on a lot of the issues I like to create art about, because I tell my mom a lot. My mom is Black and I talk to her a lot about like, you know, I'm talking about this art piece and I'm telling her that I'm making this piece about something that was traumatic when I was a child, and like to her, she's feeling bad about it. And I know she is, but I'm like also using my studies through like widgets and Africana to be like, well, let me explain to you why this is not your fault. Like, it's not your fault the opportunities were taken away from you that were then passed, you know, those difficulties and struggles and barriers were passed on to me. It's just about generational sort of cycle of trauma, and being able to explain to her that I'm creating this piece, but don't worry, it's not about you. Or I'm creating this piece, but don't worry, it's not because I was traumatized. So like my mom did get to see these paintings, and there was actually a fourth painting that I chose to not show because it was painful for my mom to see, because it was about a memory. I'll explain it because it's funny, but like to her, she's embarrassed about it. But I did talk about it like in other places that, and one of the other memories I was painting about, and I just both didn't have time. And then when I was like trying to do it, I was like, I think this is going to upset my mother during graduation week. And I was like, that's not my goal with my art, to upset her or upset anybody. And so, or upset myself even when I upset her. It was about this one time, the apartment we lived in, unfortunately, and most of the apartments we lived in were pretty infested with roaches. And that's just like gross, but something that's like just very common in cities and apartment buildings is you get pests. And everybody has them. It's something to be ashamed of. And I've always tried to tell her, people have mice, people have rats, people have pests. It's got nothing to do with you, that nature exists and that cities have encroached on it. And it's nothing because we're dirty. It's just because, like, you know, it's okay to say you are poor. It's okay to say you do not have the resources, because it's not your fault. It's not you. You are working teeth and bone to support us. And so it was a painting of this one time. I went to go drink out of a Coke can on the table in the apartment, and there was a roach in it. And I look back on it, and every time I see a Coke can out in the open, I think about it. But it's like funny. I accidentally drank a bug, and I like spit it out. But I was really young, and so I was painting a roach on a Coke can because it was like a hallmark memory of the place. And my mom was just so sad about it, like felt really guilty about it. So I chose to admit it from the piece, because I was like, just this go through with my wanting to owe the truth about it. Because like to other people, they won't be able to see. I think it would not be apparent in that one. I think I kind of failed with that one to show that it was more whimsy. It wasn't it wasn't so serious. I think the other ones have all this color and sort of playfulness to them that shows that like it was not so serious. It was more of a good memory. Whereas this one with the roach was a little dark, and I was like, I don't think people will be able to catch that. I just didn't think it fit. And I also just didn't want to hurt my mom's feelings. And I think that's another way that sort of that interdisciplinary view gave me a different perspective, that it's not just about the art, it's also about how it affects people. And I wanted to make sure it affected people, especially my mom, being that a lot of this work is based in her memories too. I think I sometimes forget, a lot of us sometimes forget when we're creating, that other people also have memories of events when we talk about them. Like, if you make art about a very, very specific event that either more than one person, it's not super personal, but even maybe a broader event, people are going to have emotions about it because they might have experienced it too. Understanding that like this was a piece that my whole family was going to have to experience. Maybe minus my little sister who was not born yet, but like still, she did experience some of these things. So I think that gave me perspective of like understanding how like privilege and like life fits into the way they'll understand it. And so like it pushed me to make certain decisions about what I wanted to show and what I didn't, even though I wanted to be honest and owe both truth and fantasy. It was also like, well, these aspects maybe aren't easy to understand because they're based in a wider social context, and I don't want people to just think this is a roach or a cocaine.
Right.
It just didn't have the same feeling. I hope that answered the question. I'm sorry.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, thank you so much for your willingness to share and your openness, because you really do see how this is so incredibly tied so innately to your work. So I really appreciate that. You're talking about how this work could affect other people, but I'm curious, and you've already spoken about it, but how this work has really affected you, and especially going forward. I'm going to ask that question of what's happening in your future, but I feel like you could take that any way you want, you know, what logistically, but also emotionally, like how has these works, how have they changed you? How are they going to shape your future? Are you going to see art being a part of your future? However you want to take it.
I don't know. Like I have such bad ADHD that art comes in waves for me that like sometimes I have this thing where like when I talk about my art and when I show it all together, if I gave you a bunch of my paintings, I feel like you would look at a bunch of them and be like, I don't know which you did and which you didn't. Because it just changes. So like I don't have a style and I don't have a medium I focus on. I do that thing where I take a new hobby up every month and I do whatever that is. So I'm like, people are like, what medium do you like? And I'm like, oh, I love to paint. But like inside, I'm like, I have no clue. Like, I don't know. Like, I've got a painting here on the side here that's like a sandwich. Like, it's just a it's got nothing to do with anything. It's just a sandwich. And sometimes I just make art like that. And sometimes I make art that is about being homeless as a child. And sometimes I painted, this is one of my favorite things I've ever done. I painted Ophelia in the style of like an anime girl one time. Like, I'll have to show it to you. Nothing to do with anything. It was just feeling like I wanted to do that. So some of the work I make is like based deeply in like processing trauma and emotions. And sometimes I just want to make things. So like future wise, I don't know. And also like, I'm in such a job search right now, and just being like someone who is not wealthy and someone who does not have the resources to be just an artist the rest of my like just at this moment in time, maybe one day. I think I just like to do too many things and find myself so distracted with what the world has to offer of like doing all these different things. Like I was an intern for WCMA and I've just been interviewed for a lot of museum jobs because I love working in the museum, but I also love to paint. So it's like, you know, what do I want to do? But also you do need a job to support artistic sort of, it's expensive. It is. And it sucks that, you know, I just haven't been able to do any painting recently because like the money to buy paints and stuff is just not within my, it was just very wonderful to be at Williams and be able to do that because like I was like, let me suck up as much of this budget as possible and like buy paints and use them all and buy the biggest canvas as well. I don't have to pay for them. And so I think future of art for me, I think I will definitely keep creating. It's just something I've done my whole life because I think I just like I feel like I'm just somebody who's like a serially obsessed with like Michael's craft store. And I think that's just like where a lot of this comes from is like my mom is a preschool teacher and just used to take me there all the time. And I would just buy tons of art supplies for like Staples. Like just I would go there and buy like all the pens and pencils, like nothing to do with school, just buy. And so I think art practice for me also has a lot to do with the materials available at the time. And I've also been thinking a lot recently about like sustainability and like, you know, acrylic paint is plastic and I've been thinking about that, but also like resources to do it sustainably is also difficult. So it's like on my mind and between my mind and like, you know, I also like to work with clay and there were actually a few pieces that didn't make it to the show that were made out of clay because they just kept falling apart. I was like, I don't want to deal with this because it is my last week of college. And as much as this was fun, I am tired. And so I don't know. It's kind of a big I don't know because I never kind of know because it just comes out of nowhere sometimes. But I'm just like, oh my God, I have to paint this. Or like, oh my God, I have to sculpt this. Or like me and my friends make a lot of work together. We're like, let's get together and do this. And like whether it happens is like a lot of based on the fact of whether or not we finish it. And so like, I don't know. I guess that's a lot of talk to just say, I don't know. But I think that art is just such an inherent part of my life that like, I spend so much time in the morning, even though I like don't wear a lot of makeup these days. Like I just spend so much time being like, what? Like if I showed you like my palettes of like eyeshadow, like I only own like colored palettes because I'm like, it's kind of like painting in the morning. Like, and just, I think every day there is like steps that I take to incorporate art into my life of like, doing makeup as I think as a performer. And this also goes to just sort of like, I think that the changing conception of what is art, what isn't, needs to be changed a lot. Like, it does not have to be a painting in a museum. If you want to say that your outfits every day are a piece of art, I think you should be allowed to, because like, I don't know who decided what is and what isn't. The word has such a weird, for something so broad and so seemingly in its like talkity talk around it, wide and experimental, there's such a rigid definition. And it's like, this makes no sense to me. Whatever you want is art. And if you have a justification for it, I'm not going to say anything to you. So like, I think continuing to think about that, I think both I don't know, and also like I always do it. Like I'm like, you know, like it's always there. It's here, it's in the corner. You never know where it's it's hiding. And so I don't know. I'm like, both an everyday thing and a never thing.
Mm-hmm.
That sounds like something an artist would say. And I'm kind of like, and like the like the want to not talk like an academic in me is like, you know, like, but also I'm like, what can I do? I did go to Williams College. It's just, I have to accept it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Wow. Well, thank you, Alexa. This has been
Thank you.
This has been lovely. And thank you, Amber, as well.
This has been a lot of fun.
Yes, I've enjoyed it.
Sorry it took me so long.
Oh my gosh, no, not at all. Yeah, so I've enjoyed talking with you both, and I can't wait to see what is in everyone's future. And the art ahead.
You're a studio art major, so I'll be looking out in this next couple of years for you to your senior show. I'm excited.
I know, me too. We will see. Lots of time ahead.